Hi. So today we are going to continue to discuss some of the theoretical foundations that I think are important for you to keep in mind or consider while you are cultivating your professional identity or your personal identity or any other component of your very multifaceted identity. Um, the readings this week actually focus mostly on some theories of interpersonal relationship development. But as you may have learned in some other classes in this program, there's kind of a false dichotomy when we think about areas of communication like interpersonal communication and computer mediated communication, because the truth is we're engaging in interpersonal communication when we are whether we're doing it on the computer or social network sites or text message or whatever. A lot of times that's interpersonal communication. The only difference is it's happening not face to face, but it's happening through a screen or through a phone or some sort of channel, right? And I think that's a good way to start talking about what I want to address this week, because I want, by the end of this summary lecture, by the end of you finishing your readings, for you to be able to think about, okay, we have this theory of how people develop relationships. How is this change? Let me back up. Has this changed at all with new technologies, or does the process stay the same, whether or not we're communicating face to face, or whether or not we're communicating through some sort of, whatever, technology, computer, yada yada. Okay, so it is very possible that just like last week, we talked about Goffman and self-presentation concerns and things like that. You may have gotten that in some other class, especially if you've had a lot of COMM classes. I think the theory this week is equally prevalent and popular. It's, I guess you can call it a staple of communication studies. It's called social penetration theory, and that's what it's about. It's about how socially we kind of penetrate one another, but like not in that way. I know that's not the only time that there's probably going to be an awkward moment like that, but it is, right, how it's a theory of how we develop relationships with other people and how they sort of simultaneously develop a relationship with us. And it is very tied to communication, as you can imagine. Basically, social penetration conceptualizes the communication scenario as, you can think about it as, everybody uses the onion comparison, right? Or we can do something different, but it has to have layers to it. I should have thought of this before. What besides an onion has layers? Um, um, God, I guess the onion works really well. Like a pineapple, it doesn't really have layers. I mean, most fruits, right, they have an external, and they've got a fleshy internal. Oh, and then, well, whatever, fine. Let's try an avocado. We'll have limited examples. It won't work as well, but we can do it anyway. So think of an onion or an avocado, and it's got a shell on the outside, a shell, the chicken thing. It's got skin on the outside, and then it's got some delicious avocado fleshiness on the inside, and then of course it's got this like really solid core. And basically, social penetration theory is about how when we meet somebody, when we are developing a relationship with somebody, the information that we give about ourselves is usually just surface level stuff. It's the stuff on the outside of the onion, the outside of the avocado. It's superficial is not really a good word, but it's relatively superficial in that it's just things about yourself that, small talk, right? Like things that you like, how you feel about the weather, things like that. But then as you get to know somebody, right, you can go a little bit deeper and you might get more into that fleshy avocado core. You peel back a layer of an onion and you get to know a little bit more about them until, right, I mean, the whole goal when you want to really know somebody intimately is to get to know them at the core. So what this theory is trying to explain is, how does that happen, right? How is it socially that we are able to penetrate? How is it that we're able to peel back people's avocado skin or onion layers to get closer to knowing who they actually are, right? And that's depth. In the meantime, though, even if you don't get to know somebody with a lot of depth, there's something to be said about what they would call breadth, right? Maybe I don't know who somebody is to their core, and I don't know much more about them than their likes and dislikes and their moods and, again, surface level types of things about them, but there's something to be said about knowing a lot of little things about somebody. It's not the same as knowing like the deeper things about them, but in terms of thinking about how well you know somebody, even people who you know a lot of little things about, you can't have a sense of knowing, right? So anyway, the key though about social penetration theory, how it is that we remove those layers to try to like get to know somebody, it's all about basically the norm of reciprocity. It's about the idea that if I share a little bit about myself, if I self-disclose and tell you something about me, and surface level things, deep things, whatever, what tends to happen is people will disclose back and they give you a little piece. So if I peel back a little piece of my layer, if I go and, you know, show you some of my green avocado nest, my guacamole. Yeah, this is totally not working, but I've already started recording this, so we're just going to keep going with it. Then you too, right, are going to want to reciprocate. And I mean, really think about how this works, right? When somebody tells you something that is a little bit more personal, for two, you know, more than one reason, you might share something about yourself. And I think one of the reasons for it is it just kind of feels awkward when somebody's sharing them, you know, something personal about themselves and you're just sitting there like taking it in, right? Social norms and etiquette even kind of dictates, right? When somebody's in that position and they're making themselves a little bit more vulnerable, you can make them feel more comfortable by opening up and sharing something of yourself. But I think that the other component is we also feel more comfortable when somebody's showing a part of themselves. You know, it makes us feel more trusting and like we can open up. And I think it also signals, right, a willingness to develop relationships or whatever. So that's really the social penetration theory in a nutshell. Your reading also mentions social exchange theory, which feeds into this a little bit, which is basically, you know, social exchange theory looks at relationships as an exchange, right? And basically, the way social exchange theory thinks about things is like we don't want to put more into our relationships than we're getting out of them. So we're always sort of balancing cost and rewards, and it's like I might be able to put up with like some of your crap, but that means I need to be getting something out of it too, right? And if the things that I'm putting up with and the stuff I'm getting out of it are out of balance, right, then it's a relationship that I'm not interested in keeping. Sorry, and the way that pertains to social penetration theory is so long as that ratio is in a good spot, so long as I feel that I'm getting a lot of rewards out and the cost the cost that I have to pay. Sorry, somebody's having a birthday party in the office, which I'm glad I'm not a part of. It's too much small talk, right? But anyway, the social exchange theory factors in because the more that you feel like you're getting rewards, the more willing you're going to engage in this like penetration process. Okay, so that's it. You know, social penetration theory in a nutshell. Oh, nutshell, maybe that would have been better. Yeah, never going to do the avocado again. So the second reading that you had this week is something that it's a New York Times article that came out in 2008, and that's when I first read it. And I gotta say a couple things. First of all, this article was something that kind of changed my mind about well, it kind of sparked my interest in social media. In 2008, I was still in graduate school, and I was studying the media, and I was getting a PhD in whatever media studies and yada yada yada. But I was mostly studying traditional media, and you know, social network sites were gaining in popularity, and I was on social network sites. But I guess I wasn't. I wasn't intellectually like interested in them very much, right? I used them, but I didn't really want to study them or research them or teach about them or anything like that. And I read that article and it really kind of changed how I was thinking about what was going on in our media environment. This article, it traces a little history which, you know, history doesn't change. So even though the article's over 10 years old, some things always stay the same. It traces the history of the news feed, and it talks about Mark Zuckerberg, where, you know, his decision to sort of implement the news feed, because it used to be that Facebook, and also things like, you know, back then MySpace was around, kicking and everything. It used to be that, like, you would use a social network site and you would have to, if you wanted to see what was going on with somebody, you would actually have to type in their name and go to their page, right, to see what's going on. And Facebook, you know, ingeniously was like, well, what if we just feed people a stream of information about what people are doing? So then you don't have to go and look at them. And whether you want it or not, you're going to get this stream of information about what people are doing. And I don't know how many of you remember or were on Facebook when, you know, the newsfeed came out. I actually do remember. People did kind of freak out a lot. I mean, the truth is there's a lot of changes that Facebook has done, and you'll read in this article that Mark Zuckerberg kind of poo-poos it as like, yeah, we do a lot of things differently, but we know people are just going to get used to it. And sadly, I think he might be right. But in hindsight, with some of the things that have gone on with Facebook in the past few years, it's just funny to sort of see how proud he is of doing things that people don't like and telling them to just get used to it. But anyway, with the news feed, he was correct in that, you know, once people got used to it and they sort of saw the value of, you know, being able to log on and get these, like, you know, automatic updates of what people were doing. And, you know, they've changed the algorithm a lot over the years. I think it used to actually be a lot more like Twitter and in your face. But people dug it. And I think, you know, at least in this article, the whole article is about this concept of ambient awareness. I think that people were feeling with this evolution of the newsfeed that it was giving them the ability to kind of feel like they're with other people, right? To keep tabs on people. And at the time, you know, maybe people still say this, like they kind of were making fun of like Twitter, like, oh, I don't care what you had for breakfast, like, oh, I don't, you know, and that's one way to think about social media, right? It's like a place where people go to you know, post about all of these things that other people don't care about. But I think what Facebook's, you know, invention of the newsfeed showed us, which again followed by Twitter, I don't mean to give Facebook all the credit, but I think that what the newsfeed has shown us and what this article is trying to explain is that you're right. What somebody has for breakfast on one day is not necessarily that great, right? As far as social penetration theory, okay, that's just a superficial piece of information. But if you're getting a constant stream of what people are doing on a regular basis, maybe several times a day, maybe several times a week, over time, you get this sense of awareness of them. You get a sense of their timing, of their routines, especially if it's something like Twitter where it's more common to post multiple things in a day. You start to pick up on different patterns about them. And what I think is really interesting, and this kind of leads to the question I have for your worksheet this week is, you know, on one level, you know, you could say, well, you know, this isn't really social penetration-y because, like, people are just sharing all this superficial information about themselves normally. But I guess one of the questions I have is it really all that superficial when you're getting not just technically what people are saying, but all of the things that come with it? You're able to see their interactions. You're able to see how other people respond. Like I said, you're able to pick up on other cues, like things about their routine. Maybe the type of breadth that we're getting is a lot deeper in some ways, so long as people are actually regularly participating in it. That's kind of an open question I have. I don't think it's really been researched. But something more interesting that I want you to think about in terms of like a possibility of how social penetration might operate differently on social network sites is that, remember, the whole core of social penetration was reciprocity. But if you think about how a news feed works, people aren't sharing information necessarily with the goal of reciprocity in mind. Now, people might share information because they are motivated to get likes and other different types of interaction, although there's some research to suggest that people might do that sort of thing even if they don't get any feedback. So that's something to keep in mind. But I wonder if, you know, if people are just sharing to share, how does that complicate the whole process of social penetration? Because social penetration says share something with you and you share something back with me. And I don't think that that's necessarily how it always works on social network sites. Certainly, let me be clear, I think it could work that way, right? If I'm having a conversation with you, public or private, whatever the case is, and I share something, you're going to want to share back. But I'm talking more about the newsfeed thing. I'm talking about when you're posting content. Maybe that's a better way of putting it. When you're posting content, people are getting to know you. I think that's the point. We talked about branding, right? Part of the brand, right, is getting to feel like you understand somebody's essence, right? I mean, maybe it's not even authentic. Authenticity keeps sort of coming up about, well, is it real? Or are they just, putting on a show? Is this front stage, backstage, all that stuff? Yeah, I get that. But I guess what I'm saying is like, thanks to social network sites, we do exist in a world where it's very easy. It's much easier to get to know some people without having to actually reciprocate. The other question is, do people still have the urge to reciprocate to the same extent? Does that mean if I'm reading a lot of your content that it's sort of, I get the urge to share my own content? I don't think it really works like that, but it's something to think about, something I want you to think about. We have these existing theories of how we communicate interpersonally in face-to-face settings. What is it about social network sites or other computer-mediated communication context that changes these things? That's the stuff I want you to start thinking about. It could be things like the news feed or other features, but I'm interested to get your thoughts on that. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. Just let me look at my notes really fast. Yeah. I just had a little note about that, reading about how the reason people didn't like the newsfeed is because they were afraid Facebook was recording everything. And it's like, yeah, welcome to 2019 or whenever you're watching this video in the future, 2020, 2021. How long am I going to be sharing this with people? Yeah, okay. I think that pretty much covers it. So just make sure, you have a good grasp of what that sense of ambient awareness is, and you can sort of explain the tenets of social penetration theory and contemplate how these things might be different in computer-mediated contexts, and I think you're set. Oh, the only thing I did want to say, because I felt like I haven't done a great job of this, is like, why am I even teaching this stuff? Like, why are we even talking about this in this class? And it is because, I think that understanding these dynamics, understanding how reciprocity operates, understanding the power of ambient awareness, right, are the things that you need to think about when you're trying to cultivate some sort of online identity, whatever side of your identity that you want to show. I think in order to be successful, these are the things you have to think about. You need to think about how to get people to feel connected to you and how to make them feel closer to you. And social penetration describes how to do that, at least in face-to-face context. What I want you to think about is like, okay, can I apply those same principles to social network sites or not? What stays the same and what changes, right? Same thing with the stuff we did with the dramaturgical model and stuff like that. So, okay, just wanted you to know that I have a reason for talking about this, and I will stop talking. So, okay, bye.